Hi, Robert here. Just a quick couple of things before we get started here. So I'm working with a couple of new cameras, and the reason I bought new cameras was so that I could start live streaming. And once you get into the video, you'll see how I have the screen set up. So I have one camera sitting right overhead on my table, and then one camera on the lower side right at my machine. And that's how I would generally set things up for a live stream so that you could see both the table and the machine all at the same time. And then my camera on my face would actually pop in whenever I need to answer questions rather, periodically. So that's the way I would have it set up. So you're used to actually seeing my videos with one camera at a time. So I'm planning to do live streaming. So I was just kind of getting used to how the cameras work. Now, a couple things is I know that the white is really, really bright. So I think you can still make out what I'm doing. And also the audio is a little uneven when I lean over away from my mic that I have pinned on my shirt. It seems that the audio goes out. Now, previously I've recorded all these videos on my iPhone, and the audio seems to be pretty even that way, even with the mic. So with these two new cameras, I'm just learning how to get used to them. I'm also using some new software that I'm not used to. So I've got everything set up, I think, how it would be when I do live streaming rather. Just understand that this particular video was not a live stream. I just shot it as if I were doing a live stream, just to find out your thoughts on the placement of the videos and how that all works out. So enjoy this video. It's basically a mask pattern for face masks, and you don't need a pattern. There's no pattern to download. I give you all the measurements that you need to make. It's basically a bunch of rectangles. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up about some of the sound issues and also some of the brightness issues. But let me know what you think about the layout, and hopefully in the very near future I will be doing some live streamings every couple of times a month. And if you want to find out when I'm going to do those, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified when I'm planning to do that. For now, with that, let's get right into the tutorial. Hi, I'm Robert Joseph. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm actually doing something a little bit different. As you can see, the screen is a little bit different than what you're used to. And what I'm just kind of I'm testing out some new cameras and some layouts because I would like to start doing some live streams with you. And I just kind of wanted to test to look at the screen and see how it would kind of work. So I thought that I would do this little tutorial and actually record everything in the setup that I would do. Let me know how you like the layout. So you can see that I have my table, my top view here with one of my cameras, and then I have my other camera back here for the sewing machine part. And then, of course, the front view camera on my computer for answering questions and actually talking to you. Now, one note here, I will turn this light on that's behind me when I get into the tutorial today. I just didn't want it on because it will overpower the light in the back of me. Kind of like this one is kind of doing right now, but I needed some light. So how did this tutorial come about? What I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to actually show you how to make this, I guess they call it a 3D mask, but it's kind of a pattern that I just kind of did. There's no pattern download for this. I'm actually going to tell you how to construct the pattern pieces. It's basically a bunch of rectangles. But anyway, my friend Julian asked me for some nicer masks. I had made her some other ones previously, which were actually a little bit more whimsical. And she is a wedding officiant in Maui. And so she asked me for something that was a little bit more simple island-like and a little bit more spiritual. And I had this fabric and this other leaf fabric, which I'm going to do for you in this tutorial. And she liked these two. So truth be told, I actually did a tutorial on this mask, but it was kind of a fail because learning this new technology in the scene that I have set up here with this software, I forgot to add in my mic audio. So I have an entire tutorial without any sound. But you know what? Live and learn. So So as I mentioned, Julian is a wedding officiant in Maui, and I'm going to put her link down below in the description. It's freerangedpriestess.com, and if you're interested in getting married in Maui or any kind of blessing ceremony, or actually in the entire state of Hawaii, she can fly between islands. She would be happy to work with you, so give her a shout out when you're over there. The other thing that she does, which I think is actually beautiful, is that she makes non-traditional rosaries, and I'll show you one that she made for me here. It's actually absolutely beautiful. And my favorite color is green, and so this one here is all pretty much green, and at the end here we have the tree of life, and then the separating beads here are little turtles, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, slightly non-traditional than your normal rosaries. She also makes prayer chaplets, which are simply shorter, and every chaplet and rosary comes with a write-up that tells the story of your personal rosary. She really personalizes this for you, and this comes with every rosary and chaplet. And of course, every rosary is blessed before it is sent to you. So if you would like a rosary, or these are perfect for gifts, check out her link below. Again, it's freerangedpriestess.com, and the link is below. So now let's start talking about this mask, which we are probably going to be having to be wearing for quite a while, even though the vaccines are coming out. We will probably still need to be wearing these for quite a while. And you know, there are a lot of different occasions that we need to wear them for. So I'm sure at the end of all of this, we're going to have a closet full of masks. I know I will. Now, I used to sell these masks, but I don't do it anymore. It just got to be too much on top of everything else I'm trying to do. And of course, I'm trying to give you more patterns as we go out. And I've started a women's pattern line, Leslie Ann, which you can find at shopleslieann.etsy.com for women's patterns. So I'm really going to start trying to add a little bit more content here to my YouTube. And so with all of that I'm doing, I just decided not to try to sell these physical products anymore. So with that, I'm just going to let you know that I'm right here. I'm going to go away because there's no need for you to watch the back of my head while I am over here at the table explaining everything to you. And also here at the machine. So I'm going to turn the rest of my lights on, and I'm going to explain how to make this 3D mask with a pocket for a filter and also for a nose wire. Okay. Okay, so let me swing over here. And actually, let me turn on this other light. I will forget that if I don't. So having the two cameras is kind of nice because I won't really have to do a whole lot of editing unless I need to actually stop something, you know, for some reason or another. So I have the fabric here, so you're going to need about a 1/4 yard of fabric, and actually a 1/4 yard of fabric is actually going to give you 2 to 4 masks, depending on whether or not you actually use a separate lining. And I use a separate lining. So I use a solid lining, and then for the outside is this print. So the pattern, you're also going to need, before you can do the pattern, the other things that you're going to need, this is optional, you don't need these, but I use these little toggles for the elastic bands around the ears, and that's to actually tighten it up or loosen the elastic for your comfort. The other thing you're going to need is some elastic, and I use this 1/8 inch. It's kind of, I don't know if it's actual medical grade, but I see it on the medical masks all the time. It has a really great degree of stretch and recovery. I mean, it really recovers really, really well. And this is actually quite a lot more comfortable around the ears. So I use this type of elastic, and I normally cut 9 inches for each side, which is 18 inches, which is a 1/2 yard. But today I think I'm going to cut 10 just to give her a little bit more room to make a decision on whether or not how tight or loose she wants to wear it. So that's what you're going to need. And I'm going to set this aside right now, and let's talk about the pattern pieces here. So, because we're going to have to do a little work on one of the rectangles. So basically these are all of the pattern pieces that you're going to need. And you can see my original one here that I made. I have a lot of notes on it because I actually did give this as a download, but it seems kind of silly because it's really just a rectangle, and I can walk you through getting it all set up with these angles here. So how this works is that this piece here is basically 8 by 10, and then the corners are cut off. A square 3/4 inch quarter is cut off of each of the corner. And how this works is that I have some notches here, and these 2 notches are where we're going to fold the fabric to create pleats. So we would fold it over here on this pleat, and you see, on this notch, flat. Everything is lined up here to the edge. And then here at the corner of that angle is where we will fold this back, and we will line that other cut edge, that angle edge, with the side of the mask, right? So it creates this pleat inside, which angles down to where your chin would be or where your nose would be, which gives you greater room in the front of the mask here. And I'll bring that in so you can see how it is here. Now sometimes, depending on how accurate you are with your cutting and sewing, these will overlap a little bit, but you can see that they actually angle down to widen this area, but here they make it kind of tight and nice and snug, which actually cups and holds your chin and your nose area. So that's why we actually cut those angles out. So that's what we're actually going to do. Now you don't have to put notches over here at the corners, but these 2 here are pretty important. So let's make the first piece here just like that, okay? So to go over the pattern pieces, the mask body, which you're going to need to cut 1 of a printed fabric and then 1 of your lining fabric, or you could actually make everything out of the same fabric. So you're going to cut 2 of these. So then we have the filter pocket, and if I would keep this up here instead of putting it away, this is the filter pocket, okay? So the finished width is 3 inches, okay? So the filter pocket rectangle is 7 inches by 4 inches because all of the pattern pieces include seam allowance or hem allowance. So, and then we have this piece, the 4-inch by 2-inch rectangle, which are for the binding pieces at the side. Now I know that I've seen some people just fold this over and create that tunnel, but I actually did not make the pattern that way because the reason I have it 10 inches is so that I could get 4 out of a 1/4 yard. So if I'm using printed fabric and I buy a 1/4 yard of fabric and a 1/4 yard of lining, then I can actually get 4 out of that because your widths on your basic woven fabrics are about 43 to 44 inches, and of course 10 times 4 is 40, so I'd have just a little bit left over. And then, of course, I can buy additional fabric for the binding pieces and the nose carrier wires, nose carrier pocket. And that's what this is. So here you're going to need 5-inch by 1.5-inch width for the nose wire carrier, which is right here. And I will get to how I create these wires on the inexpensive once we get to that spot, all right? So again, I'll just go over these quickly one more time, and I'll get my hands out of the way so you can actually record those findings because I'm not doing any fancy text over the video or anything. So 8.5 by 10, 8.5. I'm not editing this video, so it's 8 by 10 for the body, the mask body, 7 by 4 filter pocket, 5 by 1.5 for the nose wire carrier, and then 4 by 2 for the binding pieces. And you'll need 2 of the binding and 2 of the mask body. All right? So let's actually do these notches and these corners on the side. So the first thing I'm going to do is that these notches are 3 inches apart, but it's 1.5 inch from the center. So the way I'm going to actually do this is fold this lengthwise. Okay, I'm going to put a crease in it. And then I'm going to use my ruler. I can move these out of the way. Well, that happens. I'll take care of that later. So 1.5 inches from the center. I just need to mark it 1 here and 1.5 here. And so I'm just going to put a little pencil mark because I need to put the same over here. But instead of having to mark it all over again, I'm just going to fold this in half again. And then I have a notcher. I use a notcher like this because I'm a pattern maker and I have all those tools. I notch that and that's all I need. Okay? So now I've got notches on both sides. Now I said I need to take out, I need to mark, it's kind of like a 3/4 inch square, but I just need to mark those 3/4 inch marks. So 3/4 inch down, and you only need to do this on one corner. So those are the marks, and then I'm going to draw my diagonal line. And actually I'll do that with red. I have a red pin here so you can see what I'm doing. Now you could make this bigger, but if you do make it bigger, it's going to be a lot tighter around your nose and chin area. So basically that's your diagonal, and you really kind of need that in order to get that nice angle of that little dart or pleat that we're making. It's not a dart, it's a pleat. So that's how we get that angle. So all I need to do now, since I have these creases already done, I can fold this back, fold all those corners back together, take your scissors, and then chop that little bit off. And it seems like such a little amount, but it actually makes a big difference. And there's your mask pattern. Okay? So now we can actually lay out our fabric and start cutting stuff. And I think for that, I'm not going to use the scissors. I think I've just decided I'm going to use my rotary cutter. So I'm going to run out and I'm going to grab my cutting mat and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got my mat and I was actually just going to use the scissors and cut it, but I just decided at the last minute to use my rotary cutter. So, okay, I don't have, this is kind of non-traditional, so this is the cross grain. See, I ripped it across here. So I usually lay this down, and then I want to cut the two at the same time. So I think I've actually used this fabric before too. I know there's enough here, which is the straight grain. That's the straight grain. So I can lay this just right on top of here. Just make sure I'm going to get that. This is really pretty leafy tropical fabric. All right, and now I'm going to actually use this, and I like to cut a little bit away from the edges. Sure that's right. Maybe this is, that's the cross grain, this is the straight grain. I don't know if you can hear that. So the higher pitch that you pull is actually the straight grain. So now I can kind of line this up, make sure everything is covered, the other side on the other one. And now I'm just going to cut this out. I like to come a little bit away from the edge just because I just like to make sure that everything really is going to get cut. Okay, everything is fine, so I'm going to use my weights. And these washers, just so you know, I just get them at the hardware store. You can usually buy a box of them for like $4 to $6 or something like that. I've had these forever, so I think that's about what I paid for them. Now I'm just going to actually cut around the rectangle first, and then I will cut off the corners there. One more side. Okay. So now I can cut these little corners off. Of course, be really careful with your rotary cutter. I know I get my fingers really close to it. Okay, so I can put this off to the side now. Okay, whoops, let's keep those on there for just a sec, because I need to do one more thing. I forgot that I actually need to clip my notches. There's a reason I did that. Now you could actually go back in and mark these with chalk or an erasable pen, as I have mine right here, but I decided I'm going to clip here. Okay, all right. So now that part is all done. So I have my lining and my body fabric. I'll just set that aside. And now let's cut these other pieces. So I need one of the filter pocket and one of the nose wire. And that means I have to bring back that fabric I just tossed to the side. So let's bring this in here again. Cut this off. I don't need that much. I'll go ahead and press this after, once we get started. So here's my 7 inches by 4 inches by filter pocket. And then I'm going to need this, but I'm going to cut these individually. So this won't take that long. Once you do a lot of these, or you have one pattern, it will actually go pretty quickly. And when I was making these to sell, I would just layer all my fabrics on top of each other, and I would be done in no time. So there's the one pocket, and then I can lay the one nose wire. And I'm not really worried about conserving the fabric or laying out anything fancy, because this is just a couple of masks, and this is actually a smaller piece of fabric that I just had lying around. This fabric is actually quilt cotton, so it's a very good for the masks. This one, I'll cut that one here. I'll go across this way. So these ones are for the binding, so there's a little bit of give in this area, and I think I'm just going to continue, see if I can do that straight line. So I need to cut this one here. Now I know some of you are probably thinking, well, isn't binding supposed to be cut on the bias? And well, if you're going around a curved line, yes, because you need it to stretch, but this is just going on the side of the mask. It's going to be sewn in a straight way. So there are those two pieces, and we are now all done cutting. So I'm going to clear off this table so that we can get to the sewing. Okay, so I brought my pressing mat in, and before you start asking questions, I made a cover for my pressing mat. This is a wool pressing mat, but it seems like I like my iron hot, and my iron, sometimes the hairs, I guess, and the wool melt onto my iron. So I made this linen cover, and I'll probably change it out to a cotton one because this has some shine to it, but that's okay. And then I do put some, like a plastic garbage bag under it, because I like to use steam. And the steam goes through the wool mat, and then it ruins my paper here on my table. And it also, I did that on my cutting mat, and it warped the cutting mat. So I had to flatten that out. So that's why I use the cover, because I don't want my iron to get icky. So I'm just going to actually press these kind of flat. There was a little bit of an issue. Just make sure everything is nice and pressed to start with. And we're actually going to work on the pieces that we need for the lining. This press. So we're not actually going to need the printed fabric or the binding pieces. Okay, so we're going to work with this. Set this off to the side. Actually, I can set both of these off to the side. That's right. So set those aside and the binding pieces over to the side. And we're just going to work with the nose carrier and the filter pocket. So all we need to do is on the shorter ends, we're actually going to do a 1/4 inch rolled hem. So now you could turn this up a 1/4 inch and then roll it over again another 1/4 inch. But what I like to do is I like to fold this over a 1/2 inch. And I'll get these all pressed. Alright, so just to show you what I like to do. So that's pressed at a 1/2 inch. So what I like to do is then fold over to that pressed edge on the inside, and then fold it over again, and then just stitch it down here on the edge of that fold. So I need to finish pressing these, and then we will go ahead and just do these all over at the machine quickly. The other thing about this pad is that I have the habit of leaving the iron like this on the pad, and I think that's because I'm so used to having a gravity-fed iron. And that's one of the reasons why it was melting. And of course, with the linen, can take really high heat, and it doesn't really hurt it. Okay, so these are all ready to be rolled hem. Again, I'm just going to fold that cut edge into that pressed edge and then roll it over again. And we're just going to top stitch this down right on the edge. Now I'm not going to back stitch because these are kind of really short pieces, and these are actually going to be going into seams, and they're going to be folded over. So that's why I'm not going to bother with the back stitching at the beginning and the end. So here, I'm over here at the machine, and I hope that's enough light. Let's see if I can move this over just a little bit more. Now I'm kind of sitting off here to the corner, so now I have some tape here on my machine, just an FYI. This machine, a lot of newer machines, when they start up, the needle is over here on the left side. I'm not a real fan of that. Maybe I'm old school. I like the needle in the center. My belief is that when you sew a seam, you need to have equal pressure on both sides of your stitch line. And I don't believe that having your needle over here, even if it's just 1/8 of an inch, gives you very good pressure. And this over here on this side is usually your garment side, and this is over here is your seam side. So it seems like you would actually need better pressure over on your garment side. But for some reason, they put the needle over here, which gives you better stability on your seam allowance rather on your garment. So I'm old school. I like to start my needle over here in the center position. And if you look here on the machine, I have all these markings, if you can barely see it. Those markings for like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 5/8. I don't use 5/8, FYI. But all of these measurements come from the fact that the needle is over here, starting on the left side. So when I move it to the center, everything is off about 1/8 of an inch. So I use 1/4 inch seams and 1/2 inch seams all the time. So the edge of the red here is my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and the edge of the blue lines here, the blue tape here, is my 1/2 inch seam. I don't mess with 5/8 inch seams. I don't know why Home Patterns did that. I think they just did it for just a little bit extra comfort for letting things out. But all of the companies that I worked in the industry for a long time in apparel production. They've either used 1/2 inch seams, 3/8 seams, or 1/4 inch seams. So it's predominantly 3/8 seams, but I use 1/2 inch seams on my woven patterns. So I'm going to actually get these sewing now. It's not me talking about all this stuff. So again, I'm just rolling this. I'm going to do this here at the machine. Now all my buttons here are up here at the front of my machine, so if my fingers get in the way, I apologize. But I'm going to actually just put this needle down manually on the side here. And I'm sewing at a 2.5, which is about 12 to 14 stitches per inch, which is pretty good for a basic woven like this. There's that, and then get this other one in here and done. I like to start with my needle down all the way in, and then start stitching. That kind of make sure that your thread isn't going to disappear on you. But these new electronic machines kind of take care of that when they do the automatic cutoff. So this is the hem for the filter pocket. And this last hem here on this side. Of course, you could finish these edges any way you want. If you just wanted to overlock the edges and then turn them over, I would still turn them over a 1/2 inch because otherwise it's going to be too far into the pleats, and we'll see that in just a minute. So I'm going to clip these up, clip all these threads off. You should be in that habit of clipping your threads as you go. When I was younger, I used to leave all my long threads as I was sewing because I just wanted to get the damn thing made. I shouldn't have said that word, huh? Anyway, I just wanted to get the thing made, but it took me so long after the end to trim everything up, you know. It kind of took the fun out of finishing it. Okay, so my pocket and my nose piece are ready. So what I'm going to do now with one of these edges on for the nose carrier, nose wire carrier, so I'm going to turn that up about 1/4 inch. And I'll press that down because we're just going to top stitch this onto the lining piece. Give it a good press here. And then for this piece, we're actually going to turn it over 1/2 inch on either side. We need this one to be a little bit heavier. And we're also going to top stitch this on to that lining piece. So 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch equals 1 inch. And if you remember, we cut this, I said this was 4 inches high. So the finished size width of this should be about 3 inches. And if you remember, the notches on the side of the mask were 3 inches apart. And this will go right about there in that center. So let's get this. Let me pull the lining piece over. This doesn't really have a face side. Either side will work. I think I'm going to do it on this side. So I just need to find the center and decide where the top is, where I'm going to put that nose carrier. So I'm just going to fold this in half and I'm just going to put a pin here just to designate the center. And I'm going to do the same thing with the nose piece. Let me turn this around so that's the way, so you can see it. So the nose piece, I'm actually just going to fold it in half. Actually, I don't even really need to put a pin in it. If I finger press it, then there's a little bit of a crease, and I can just match it there at the pin. And I need to pin it the other way because I'm going to sew this way. So you can't see where I'm doing, but I'm just pinning this right here, and I pinned it to the mat. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch right here on the edge. I'll probably start a little bit in and then back stitch and then go up here and back stitch, and everything up here is left to the edge. So I'll get that done. So get this into the machine. I'm not starting right on the edge, I'm starting in. So I'm going to take a stitch and back stitch. Okay, it looked like it had a little issue there. I'm sure it's fine. And my machine, I have a speed regulator. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Coming up to the end here, so I'm going to get ready to back stitch. Alright. Alright, now I'm going to do one more thing. I'm just going to do a small stitch kind of right just there in the center, maybe about 1/8 away from the edge, and that is going to hold that in place so that it doesn't go anywhere while I'm working with the rest of it. And then of course that will be hidden. That will be all hidden once I sew the printed fabric, the outside fabric, on here, okay? So that's on there, that looks nice. So now I need to place this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fold this. I'm just going to mark one of the edges for the center. Of course you could, mark it with a erasable pen or what. So there's my center. And then here, I'll just go ahead and fold this. You can't really see my crease mark. And I actually put my ruler away. I kind of need to show you how I'm going to line this up. What I want to do is I want to line this up on the line that goes straight across for these notches. So I can find the center. So I'm going to have to find my ruler or a straight edge. Okay, so I got my ruler. I thought that I didn't need it, so I put it away. And I did need it. So story of life, right? So I'm putting the ruler right, laying it on that line of where those notches are, there. And then I'm going to line this up to the edge of the ruler, lining my pins up as best I can. And then I'm just going to pin this here, and I know I'm going to go through to the other stuff. I'll use this pin, pin this, just so you have an idea of where that is. Yep, I'm pinned to the... Okay. So we're going to stitch right across here, back stitch, and then we're going to do the same thing right down here. Okay? So let's get that one done. Don't forget to remove your pins. Okay. Okay, so just make sure the other side is nice and flat, and then go ahead and proceed to stitch down the other side. All right. Okay, so there's that. Let me trim up these threads. Okay, and I'm going to give this one press here on this side really quick. Make sure everything is nice and flat. Okay, because now we get to match our printed fabric to our lining fabric. Now you'll just have to decide. Now this is the top of the mask because this is where the nose wire is. So you have to look at your print and decide which way you want it to go. Do we want it to go this way, or do we want it to go this way? I'm kind of liking this way. More of the leaves are going up. So that's how I'm going to do that, and I'm going to lay this over on top, match everything as best you can, and then I'll go ahead and put a couple pins. I wouldn't normally put pins in, especially if I'm doing like a lot of these. The fewer pins, the faster you can go. So on these edges, the long edges, we're going to sew this seam and this seam, and we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm sewing at, again, 2.5 on my machine. So again, this is my red is the 1/4 inch, so I'm going to get this in here. I'm going to back stitch, stitch and back stitch. Okay. Then the other side, now of course this, I'll just remind you, we have, this is the top, this is where the nose wire carrier is, so that's why I kind of stitched that down so it wouldn't actually flip out. And I need to remove that pin, it's going to be in the way. And right here is about where that carrier starts. So I just want to make sure that gets under there nice and even, because there's about 3 thicknesses now. I gotta take this pin out, and we're about to finish this seam. All right, so we've got our seams done. They are top and bottom, and I'm going to actually press them really quick. I like to press seams as I go. It sets the stitches into the fabric, and it makes everything really, really nice. So press as you go. So now I'm going to flip this face side out. So now I'm actually going to press these seams. So you're going to need to actually kind of press these seams nice and flat here on this side, right? So the way I like to do it, and I'm just going to use the tip of the iron, I'm going to make sure that the seam under here actually folds toward the lining, so I can kind of feel that it's folded up toward the lining. And I'm just going to use the tip of my iron and just push that away, and I'm kind of using a swirling motion just to get that to, you know, tell it to go up that way. And once you get enough heat on it, it'll flatten, and then just kind of use your fingers to press it a little bit flatter. And we don't want to crease any of the fabric on this side. So we're going to do the same thing on this one, except around this area for the nose wire carrier, we're going to have to get in there and kind of fold it, help it out a little bit, because there's a lot of thickness there. So I'm just going to do that, hold it with my kind of finger press that there, and then do the same thing with the iron without creasing the other fabric. And it's kind of hot, but once you lift that up and let it cool, then you can kind of press it down a little bit more with your fingers. And what that does is it helps you make a better crease when you fold the fabric over to crease it on that seam. And then of course this, you want a nice flat press on this. We're going to top stitch this on the face side of the fabric. Make sure that's nice and flat there. That nice seam there. Now if it seems like it's kind of blousy on the inside, well that's okay, because it will give you a little bit more blousiness on the inside for ease of wear, okay? So I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to top stitch now on this edge, each of these edges, about maybe 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And I'm actually going to lengthen my stitch just barely. I'm going to put it up to a 3. And I'm not going to bother back stitching. This is just a top stitch, so it will be hidden in actually in the binding. All right. And then I will do the other side. Now this is the top. So you right around here, we're going to have some thickness, so we just have to be careful that we don't get any skip stitches or things like anything like that. So just try to make it as even as possible. All right. So there's the top stitching, and it looks really nice on the underside. I'm going to clip off these extra threads. Okay. I'm going to grab that other mask that I had done, because now we're all ready to actually start working with these pleats. And we're going to need to know where those notches are. So if you need to reestablish where those notches are, do that now. And I'm going to grab this mask really quickly. You'll need some pins for this next part. So these are the pleats here that I was talking about. So we are going to create those now, but there is a method to this. So you first need to fold up the bottom. You need to do the bottom one first, and then the top one. So the reason for that is because if you put the top one down first and then you fold the pleat over the bottom, there's not going to be enough give, because this is actually still, because of the way the pleat is and the size of the mask, it's actually got a lot of pull on it. So it's going to hug your nose and your chin. If you put it under the bottom pleat, then it's going to be too tight, and then it's going to actually pull off. So we want to fold this up here. This is the notch. Okay, that's where it is. So we're folding that straight up. And I'm going to do one side at a time. So I'm folding that straight up there. Now this here is the corner of that diagonal cut that we made. And what we want to do is we want to hold on to that corner, but we want to fold this back, and we want to line up the cut edge with the edge side of the mask. Sorry, I couldn't say mask. And you'll notice that it causes this to actually pull over this way. So I'm going to actually pin that in place. And now I'm going to actually do the same thing with the top. So I'm going to fold it here on that notch that I clipped out. And again, I have the corner of my diagonal edge here. Everything is flat, and I'm going to fold that back to match everything to line up on that edge. Okay, so let me bring this up to the camera. Maybe it will, okay, so this is what you want it to look like. And we're gonna stitch over this to hold it down. Okay, so I'm just going to baste this. Now, it doesn't look like they're overlapping very much here, but yours may overlap more. Just make sure that your top is over on top of your bottom, the top of the mask. So we're going to be doing a 1/2 inch seam on this for the binding. So I can actually set it to the edge of the foot. Closer to that seam, the better, because then it will hold these in place. I'm going to remove these pins, and I'm sorry about my fingers and hands being in the way. So I don't need to backstitch. I just need this stitch to hold everything in place so I don't have to worry about it when I'm working with the binding. And if we do see the stitching, we can always rip it out afterward. Okay, so there's that one. So now I'm going to turn this around. Now this is the top, and maybe I should have done it this way on this other side. But here, this is the top. So I'm going to start with the bottom. Again, I'm going to fold it on that notch, and then here again is that corner of the angled cut corner, and I'm going to fold on that point to match that edge, and then I like to pin this in place, and then actually maybe I should pin it up here. Okay, and see how it's kind of pulling? You'll get that tension that helps it stay on your face. So then I'm going to do the same thing here at the top, fold at that notch, and then here is the corner of that diagonal cut, and then I'm folding that back down to match that edge here on the side of the mask, and I'm just going to pin that here. And now I'm going to stitch that in place to keep it in place, so when we work with the binding we won't have an issue. Okay. Okay, so that is all in place. It's going to stay together while we actually work with the binding. So we're actually going to be working with the binding, and this is when we actually need our elastic. So I'm going to grab my elastic, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring up those toggles as well. So here's the elastic, and I like to use this 1/8 elastic. I don't know if they consider it medical grade or whatever, but it actually has a really good stretch to it and recovery, and it's actually really comfortable behind your ears. It's not really restricting, and it's not wide in the sense that it won't pull your ears forward. So now I usually use 9 inches. I used 9 inches for the mask that I was selling, and the reason for that was because it kept my costing to my pieces easy, because 9 inches is a 1/4 yard, and so I would use 2 9-inch pieces, and so I would tack on a 1/2 yard of elastic for my costing. But for my friends and family, I'm going to cut 10. That just gives them a little bit more flexibility. Not that I didn't want my customers to have flexibility, but I didn't really think about it until after I quit selling those, when I got a request from a family member to add a little bit more elastic. So 10 inches. Okay, that's all the elastic that I need. Okay, so now what's going to happen with these elastic pieces is normally I sew them under all together, but I'm going to go ahead and pin them on. So I'm just going to use one piece right now. We're going to do this one. And the elastic pieces are going to go on the face side here. And if you notice on this one, I have the elastic going on the face side here, which means it will pull this way. So why don't I have the elastic going underneath? Because if the elastic were on the underneath, what would happen is that the edge of this would flip forward, and then you would have an opening. By having the elastic on the outside like this, it pulls the mask toward the back of your head or toward your ear, and it keeps the side of this flat against your face. So there's no opening. It doesn't kind of come open. Okay, so that's why I do that. Now, I usually stick the elastic, I place it about a ½ inch from the mask edge up here and here. So I don't usually pin, but since I'm doing this video, and you're gonna want to see where everything goes, I'm just gonna pin here pretty lightly here, okay? And then the other end of the elastic at the bottom here. Okay, and I'll remove these pins once I start sewing. Then I'm going to take this binding piece and I'm going to set it up here evenly. You see here I have extra on either side. What's going to happen is I'm going to fold that extra over to the other side, and I'll fold it all the way on the other side as well, and then I'm going to stitch. Well, I don't want to have a whole bunch of pins here, but I'll just show you what I mean, because I'm going to have to take these out at the machine. Okay, so that side is done, and now I'm folding this over, and it's okay if it's a little uneven, because we're going to be top stitching this all down. Okay, so there is where your binding is. Let's look at it on the inside, and that's okay. So we want it folded over each of these edges, okay? So now we just want to make sure that we don't accidentally sew this binding all crazy. So now I can go into the machine. I'm going to sew this again, a ½ inch seam allowance. So the blue edge here on the tape is my ½ inch, and I'm going to go back. I'm at 3. I'm going to go back to my 2.5 stitch length, and I'm going to start a little bit in. I think I'm just going to move this first pin. The other pin is the elastic, so let me put this foot down, and I'm going to start back stitch, come up, take this pin out, and then sew. Okay, and I'm going to come up, continue sew, take that first pin out, that's the elastic. Okay, I'll take the second pin out, that's the end. And now I'm going to want to back stitch here. Okay, so there is our stitch line. I'm going to use these pins, I'll keep them out. So I'll use those on the next one. So let's get this one all completed. So that's what it looks like. So when we turn this over here, that elastic is sewn right into that seam. So now before we turn this, it seems like, well, why didn't we just stitch a 3/8 inch seam? Well, I needed the 5/8 inch seam to make everything nice and even, to keep the seam allowances done. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim about 1/8 of an inch off, and that's so when we turn the binding over, there's enough binding to actually cover that seam. So I'm trimming about 1/8 of an inch off. Okay, and I'm going to press this nice and flat. Okay, now I can pull that binding away, right? And let's lay this out here so it sticks out. And I'm going to actually do something. I like to do this. You don't have to do this, but it makes it so much easier. I like to fold these down and press them, the remainder edges of the binding here. Keeps everything flat while I'm working with it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the cut edge of this over to close to the cut edge of the mask, and then I'm going to fold it over again. And the goal here is to cover, get this thread out, the goal is to cover the stitch line of where you stitched the binding on. So fold that over to the edge meeting the edge, and then over again. And then I'm going to pin it on the front side. We're going to top stitch from the front side this in place. You might have to work it a little bit with your fingers. And we're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch top stitch from the edge of that seam where it's on there, kind of like where I have it pinned. And if you look to the other side, if you can see your pins coming through the binding, then you know your stitching is actually going to catch the binding on the other side. Now, I don't have a problem sewing this on my industrial sewing machine, but I do have a problem sewing this on my home sewing machine, starting here at the beginning. So it won't stitch and back stitch here because there's just too much thickness and there's not enough pull on this machine. So what I usually do, I'm going to back off here on this pin, put it here in the middle. What I'll do is I'll put the needle in down this way, looking like I'm going to sew toward the edge, and I'm going to sew up this way, put the needle down, and then pivot back around and stitch over. And that will actually give it some pull. So that's what I'm going to do now. So again, I'm going to put it in this way. Right. So again, I want the needle about 1/16 away from the edge. That's good. Put the foot down. I'm going to sew up to the top. One more stitch, I think. There we go. And then I will just turn this around. The presser foot right down in alignment with that stitching. Take that pin out. I'm just going to double check, make sure everything looks good there. And then I will be able to stitch over. What that first stitching does is that it flattens everything, but it also gives you enough on the feed dogs to actually pull through. So I'm coming up here to the end. I want to do the same thing. That stitch looks good. Lift the presser foot, twist it back around, and then stitch. And this alleviates needing to do any kind of back stitching. Okay? And so this is what it looks like on the front, and this is what it looks like on the back, and that looks pretty nice. Okay? Now we'll cross our fingers that the other side comes out just as nice. So I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to pin. Again, pinning the elastic worked pretty well. Once you get the hang of this, you won't need to pin the elastic. You can just put it under here as you sew. And that's what I did when I was actually making more quantities of these. Okay, that gave me a little bit of trouble. Because the more you pin, the more you have to work. So when I'm doing a lot of like production style sewing, when I was selling products, I really didn't pin a whole lot. Of course, people like to use those clips as well. Where's my other, here it is. So here's my other binding piece. Get this in here evenly. I'm gonna roll this edge right over the edge of that. Do it a little bit better. Okay. Use this pin, and I'm just pinning it just so everything stays in place. And then roll this edge over that edge. Okay. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing in the machine here. 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press your foot down, then I'll remove this pin. Sorry about my hand. Okay, so there's that seam, and I'm going to trim this. You can either press it first or trim it. Let me trim it first, it doesn't matter. Let me get the rest of these threads out of here. Okay, so I'll trim this, again, just 1/8 of an inch, and be careful not to cut any other part of your mask if you have it falling underneath. That would not be fun. Okay, so press this seam. It helps it to fold over nicely. Fold this out. Oh, I should say that you shouldn't leave the iron on that area for too long when you press that seam, because you have this elastic, and this elastic is polyester, it's synthetic, so you don't want it to melt. I should have said that before, but now you know. So I'm going to press these down. It makes it easier to fold over. And then take the raw edge here, match it to that cut edge, roll it over, make sure that you are covering that stitching. And then I'm going to look at that one. There we go. I like to try to make it even, so that's why I was just kind of working a few things out. Now sometimes too, you won't catch this on the other underside, so just be careful about that. But I think this one will be fine. Of course, you know, now that I said that. Okay, actually I need to pin this one down a little bit further, because I need to start here and then pivot, because this machine won't take a lot of thickness. And that's not because the motor isn't strong, it's because of the way they make the feed dogs on home machines. Okay, so I'm going to get this in here going this way. Line up that wheel about 1/16 away. I'm starting a little bit further away than I needed to, but it'll be fine. One more stitch. Turn it. Press our foot back down. Take this. Everything looks fine. Take this pin out. It had a little trouble going over that thickness, but I pushed it in there, it was fine. Okay, so here we are, looks good on that side. Got some threads locked up in there. Okay, trim up your threads. And I forgot one thing, I was going to do that before I did the binding. Okay, so, and I'll come back to that. So here, basically, we have our mask pretty much completed. We have the nose wire carrier, and then we have the pocket for any kind of filter you want to put in there. And I don't really know if you can buy specific filters, but you know, I was just going to mention that you can get those disposable masks, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but whenever I go to the grocery store, they have them out for people to take. Or you can buy a box of 50 for, I don't know, $10 now. You can cut those and then put the filter up, put that fabric on the inside, and that will help. But this has 3 layers now where you're breathing, so it's pretty good. Now before I put the toggles on, I did mention that I forgot one thing, and that one thing I don't even think if I have an extra around, was my label. And of course I need to put that on here. See, I have my label here, right? So I'm gonna grab a label and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got my label, and I guess maybe that was seems a little superficial. I mean, but this is going to my friend, and she likes to help me out by, um, you know, exposing my brand, and I like to help her expose her brand. Just remember, freerangepriestess.com if you want to get married in Hawaii, or if you would like a non-traditional rosary. She also has more traditional ones on her Etsy shop. The link should be down below in the description. So I'm just going to put my label on here, and I don't really need to pin it. I can eye this pretty good with eyeing stuff, although my hand's probably going to be in the way here to get the label on here. Alright, there's one side. Now, see if I can get in here. See, it would have been better if I would have remembered to do this before I did these pleats, but pretty good. Sorry, my hands are all in the way, but you know, this is just straight stitching. Alright, so there is my label. So there are a couple more things we need to do on this. I said the toggles. Let's see, some more. Right? Now, of course, you don't need to do toggles. You could just tie if you're making this for yourself. But the toggles actually make it a lot easier to size, especially if you're going to be making masks and you have toggles of some sort. Then you don't really have to worry about if the elastic is too small or too big. They can just adjust it themselves. So I have a loop turner here, and it looks like a really long crochet hook. It has a little, actually looks like a latch hook. My grandmother used to do latch hooks crafts. So this is for actually turning spaghetti straps, but you could also use a crochet hook. And what I do, let me grab 2 of these, and I'll have links to everything that I use here except for the fabric. I got these on Amazon, and they open up here. There's a little hole here, and that's where it goes. So what I do is I open that hole, and then I put the hook through it just a little bit, and then I hook the elastic onto that hook, open the hole, and slide it through. See how easy that is? So you wouldn't believe what I was doing before I remembered that I had this loop turner. So I think I was trying to feed them through manually or using my tweezers. So I like to put the hooks all the way up, the toggles all the way up, and then I'm just going to stretch the very end of it and just tie a little loop knot, not too tight, but what that does is it makes it so the toggle can't come off. You can of course untie it and take the toggles off if you wash it, but they should be fine in the washer. You can throw this in a lingerie bag or in a pillowcase, and everything will be fine. Won't catch on anything. Do this to the other side. Perfect. Okay. Now we have one more thing. I'm gonna move all this stuff off of here. I don't know why I want to do that. I really want to clean this. I don't know if I'm going to keep this cover on my mat or get a different pressing mat. Maybe make one. Okay. So I've got this. This is what I use for the nose wires. I know a lot of people actually buy the expensive ones. Let me see if I can find the same color I found before for the other, like a dark green. That's pretty. So here's a dark green one. There was like 320 in here, and this is like for crafts and stuff. So I think I paid for this whole bag, I think it was like $10 or $12. So it was really cost effective. So what I do is these ends are kind of sharp, so I just kind of turn those and press those down out of the way. And then after that, what I do is I fold this so it's even, so it's a 3-way full, even fold, or close to pretty even. It's not going to be totally even, but you get the drift, I think. So there it's folded on top of either 3 times, 3 ways, and then I actually just go ahead and twist it. Again, nice and twist, and that actually makes a pretty good nose wire, pretty durable. And then I just kind of slip it right in here. And the nice thing about that is that it's just about the right size for the casing of the nose wire. And then of course you can just fold it for the shape of your nose. I'm not going to do that now because I'll let Julian do that when she gets these masks. All right, so that is the entirety of making that mask. The video is probably a lot longer than it actually takes to make these masks, and so those are really pretty. She will really enjoy those. Hi there, I'm back again, and there we have it, the 2 masks for my friend Julian, who is a wedding officiant in Maui, Hawaii. And if you are in the need of a wedding officiant there, anywhere in Hawaii, give her a call. She also makes free-range rosaries, or non-traditional rosaries, and chaplets for prayer. Each one comes with a dedication and the story of that particular rosary. Give her a shout out on freerangepriestess.com. And I hope that you really enjoyed this tutorial, and let me know what you think about the setup on your screen, because this is probably what I'm thinking the setup would be when I do live streams. Again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. That's the best way to know whenever I release a new pattern. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe and be well.